Hi there, everyone. I am Stephen Drew from the Architecture Social. It's Friday afternoon, and I have the pleasure of having an extra special guest on the Architecture Social, someone that actually in part inspired the Architectural Social. And I haven't said that before, but Jason, you are an inspiration for the Architectural Social, partly because of all the stuff you do in terms of mentoring. But Jason, you are an architect, and as you were an architect in the day, you're a mentor in the evening. You sound like all-round Superman. Do you want to just tell us, to the audience, a little bit about who you are, what you're about, and where you are?
Yeah. Thank you, Stephen, for that fantastic introduction. I'm an architect. I've been an architect for 20 years, believe it or not. And I think it was back in 2017, became a fellow of the RIBA. And then it snowballed and became a fellow of the Royal Society of Arts. And what I'm really passionate about since getting the fellowships is actually helping younger architects or anyone in construction with the power of mentoring and mindset. And I've been working with, I think it's 17 people now. For the last 3 years, and helping people succeed in architecture. That's what I want people to do. I want people to succeed.
Amazing. And that also, but as you said, that comes from your career in architecture as well. And that's what's important to mention. So I can see you've worked. So back in the old days. So if we go way back when, so you started working at Shepherd Robson in Manchester.
I did when there were a very small office. I think there were like 6 of us.
Wow.
And we were just underneath Stephen Hodder's office. And it was a fantastic experience. Obviously working in a large practice. I've worked in large practices, medium, and even very small practices as well. All in Manchester. Yeah.
Amazing. And look, it's really interesting to talk about your career now. Why it's important, though, is because to me, when you're talking about mentoring, we're going to talk about current events, but it's really important that you have been working in architecture for many, many years. You're still working in architecture now. And I did listen to one of your other podcasts as well. And I think you did a great one about mentoring, and we can talk about that there. But it is interesting what you do right now, because you have been an architect for over 12 years for Sellafield, and a lot of it is working in the nuclear industry. Yeah. Which in my head, and I know it's not like this, I always imagine Homer Simpson in his like little bunker press having a little sleep, but I'm sure it's far from that. It's a highly complicated and it's a highly strategic role. But for anyone that's unfamiliar with nuclear architecture, do you want to give like a little insight into the?
Sure. Again, I don't think it's any sort of architect sets out in their career thinking they're going to work in the nuclear industry. And I fell into it essentially just through the recession. And I think the people who were there, and Paul Rainford Miller was the principal architect of Sellafield, and we had chats about me joining the company, and he's sadly no longer with us. But he sort of explained to me what the role architects play in designing very complex buildings, because in the UK, as in other countries with nuclear facilities, we've got a legacy to deal with. And every building is very unique. It's very specialized in terms of dealing with reducing the nation's radioactive material. So that's what it does. So we work with many different disciplines, probably the most multidisciplinary projects you could ever imagine, working with process engineers, human factors. We're working with structural, civil, mechanical, to deal with really complex problems. And I think what people probably won't understand is these buildings take between 7 and 10 years to complete.
Wow.
So they're major projects, and you might only do 1 or 2 of these things in your career.
Yeah. Well, there you go. So 12 years, that means what you've done 1 of the bit buildings.
Exactly.
I'm sure it's a lot more complicated than that. And I giggled when you said, because you say no one dreams initially to become a nuclear architect. And hey, I studied architecture and I'm a recruitment consultant. So I have the exact same conversation on the dinner table. Like, what happened? but life kind of takes you on a different journey and you learn things along the way. And so let's talk about briefly why you got drawn to mentoring.
I think there's a lot of talk in the last, I think, probably 5 years, definitely, about mental health. And architecture is a really, really tough profession, as you probably know, Stephen. You know, it's like a 7-year process. It's we've got big financial problems now to becoming an architect. Never mind just doing the actual 7 years. This 7-year journey you go on. It's probably longer than any other profession. You know, and I wanted to help people through that process, because I think a lot of people in the industry, in the construction industry, not just architecture, put off by the challenges, the salaries, the whole juggling of debt. But I still believe, despite what people read on LinkedIn and I've had comments, that you can actually have a fantastic career in architecture. You know, it's just looking at ways to do that. I think a lot of traditional practice, running a traditional practice, is probably dead. Probably people don't want to hear that. But I think the key to my success and other people's success I could mention is definitely specializing in a particular area, becoming an expert in a particular field. So my next venture, and obviously still working for Sellafield and still working in the nuclear industry, is to build on helping people, and mentoring is just a real passion of mine.
Amazing. And look, it's kind of inspirational for me. So we talked about it briefly because we had a phone call a few months ago, which I really enjoyed, because I was basically, because of architectural recruitment, kind of dipped down, especially in the first wave. Hope we don't go into a second wave. Jason and I are going to be in a bit of trouble. But I joke around. The point was part-time. What I did was I kind of felt we needed something, and the architectural social, just as much as hopefully it gives value for other people, it was really helpful for me from a mental energy and to kind of keep the juices flowing. And we had a little chat, isn't it? And I remember we reached out on LinkedIn, and I thought, oh, I'm sure we're going to get along. As soon as you messaged, you were like, look, I'm a little bit old school. Give me a ring on my mobile. And I was like, yes. That's what I quite like, because we got to embrace these new technologies, but you can't forget that it's all about getting along with people, speaking to people. And I quite like that now we can see each other on this. It's going to come out online. It's going to be on Spotify. But what's quite nice is that why I even like this platform that we're on is called Squadcast, and it's that we can see each other's face while we're talking. And it's important, I think, with technology to still kind of have that old ways. And what I like about your mentoring is that, and we touched upon one or two people in particular, such as Colleen with her fantastic artwork that's, shot up, and she's a mentee. I think that's the correct term, isn't it? Through yourself. But what I found was quite interesting from what you told me as well, is a combination of, you got your WhatsApp groups, and in the podcast you talked about how you're structuring it, but it's very much old traditional ways and methodologies using new technology. So in terms of mentorship, in terms of everything you do you still find it's really important to have that kind of conversation like we did on the phone, or face-to-face conversations as well in this new digital world?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a number of people in my mentoring group, and we hold an event every year in Manchester for the people that can't have that face-to-face mentoring. So, there's people from all over the country, Scotland and London, and they come to Manchester once a year to have this. We have this weekend. And embracing the technology. I think this is probably the first year, I would say, that we've heavily used things like Zoom and digital conferencing. It was there. It was always there, but everyone was tinkering with it. And it's really blown up this year. And, I think I do always think the face-to-face and meeting in person is the best way. But this has got to be the second best way of actually communicating with people.
Yeah, and it's interesting as well that there's also chances for people to kind of blossom in this space as well. So let's talk literally about Colleen. It's amazing. So in terms of RIBA Journal, she's she's published the drawings, the official drawing for David Hadjay.
It just came through today. The RIBA Journal through my door.
Ooh.
Yes, I opened it up. Obviously, it's online as well. But I've just opened up the journal and actually sent it across to her. So again, I think it's like yourself, Stephen. You've created this architect social when you're on furlough, essentially. And you did something with that time, something that's really powerful, and you should be applauded for doing that. It's a great thing. And Colleen did the same thing because she was very much, asking me, what do I do now? I don't know what's going to happen at the end of furlough, and how can I make the most of my time? And I like that attitude in people, and I could see the talent she was doing because she started doing just portraits for friends and family. This is how it all started. And I said, you've got to turn this into a business. Stop doing work for free. This work, people will pay for it. So we set up a strategy and looked at business ideas of actually starting to get her work out there. She set up the website, but she did this so quick, and these are the type of people I like to work with, where they say, right, you need to build a website, you need to get your social media set up. I think she did it in a couple of days, and then it was straight on to doing the portraits.
It's amazing. And you touched upon something really interesting there that I also struggle with. And one of the advantages of mentoring is that you can kind of reflect these issues. So you've got more experience and you've kind of seen things from a business sense. But like Colleen, it's quite an innocent thing. And I've done it as well at first, especially when you're getting into the industry. You naturally think you're going to do drawings and the best thing to do is it's for free. And that's nice. But the point is, it's okay to charge for fees for things sometimes, and it's okay to establish self-worth. And I don't know whether that's, so I joke sometimes maybe it's a British thing that we're too polite or what, but I think that this problem I've seen, it can transcend architecture, it can transcend recruitment, and what I find happening in recruitment has been a culture shock for me, Jason, is that traditionally, what you'll find sometimes in terms of recruitment is, say now you need someone for your team, you might have 2 to 3 architectural recruitment companies on board, and normally there's a fee established upon delivering that person. Now, that's the traditional way to go about it. So that means that you pay me nothing up front. Now, the downside of that means that what happens is that then there's a race to get you the CV to send things across, because that's the billable that's how the fee is generated in terms of recruitment. And what I've seen in terms of architecture, and you've worked in architecture longer, but examples of maybe working for free, working for competitions, if you don't get that, then it can put staff in a precarious situation as well. And with Colleen right now, the fact is that if she can charge for the beautiful drawings, and that's what we got to establish here. They're great drawings, but it goes towards her, it goes towards her livelihood in a time of need, and then she can better do her craft. So
she can charge more money for her portraits as well, because she's more established.
And so this is what I've enjoyed about us talking everything. And so for anyone listening out there, I would almost encourage that attitude of pushing commercial viability. It's almost like in these times like these, you're going to feel under pressure. You're going to feel like, oh, maybe I should slash my fees to be competitive. But in doing that, you're kind of devaluing yourself. You're devaluing what you do. I mean, what's your kind of thoughts on that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think architects and artists and even other people in the construction industry give valuable advice away for free as well. I mean, I'm guilty of it with a lot of the mentoring, because a lot of the mentoring I have done for free, but not anymore. what the advice I'd give is always people are always willing to pay for things. So, I've got an iPhone in front of me here. People are willing to pay a fortune for this. I'm sure it doesn't cost the £1,000 I think that this phone ends up costing. So there is value in good design and good sort of portraits that Colleen does. She's got a very certain style. And I think that's what's unique about her. She honed her style very quickly. And it's almost now you can see a Colleen portrait, from the style that she does. And that's what you've got to do. So you've got to get that style, you hone your craft, and then charge for it. I'll give you an example of exactly what you were talking about, though. Colleen, I'm not going to mention the person that this affected architect, but she had sort of said up front, this is how much it's going to cost. She'd sent the work through. She'd, had some comments back and then sent the final thing through. She'd sent the invoice through to this particular person. And then, I'd sort of asked the question because we were speaking every week about how things were going. And I said, "Oh, did you get paid for that last portrait you did and that you posted on social media?" And she said, "Oh no," I said, "I've not got paid." I said, "Okay, pick up the phone now." I said, "Well," I picked up the phone and I actually said, "Right, while we're on this phone, type an email to this person reminding them that the bill is outstanding." She did that. An hour later, she was paid.
Great.
And he just simply forgot. Forgot,
Yeah, and I think that's a really good example because I think, again, and I've done that when I had my own recruitment business, you do the service and then I remember the feeling of feeling embarrassed to ask for the fee. You're like, "Sorry, Jason, hi, do you mind? I know you're busy, but do you mind if you have a spare moment? Do you mind having a look at my invoice?" And then, which is natural, but now it's like invoice, boom. And I think there's something as well where McDonald and Company been really good and I've learned as well is that actually sometimes sticking to a strong fee, what you've got to remember is that, okay, if you pay me a higher fee per se, it's not because I'm sitting here giggling and then I get a higher fee. If I ask for or command a higher fee, then in relation to that, I and you expect for a higher quality service. And therefore, I think as well with retained work or anything like that, so paying Colleen up front or paying in recruitment or paying for architecture up front, what then it allows you to do or me to do is that then I can enable my team, get people on board to do a really good job, canvas the market, or in architecture would be, do a full-blown brief, do a full-blown report of what we're doing. Or in Colleen's instance, she's got the time and energy to research the person and do a really good, fantastic job of getting the art piece. And so that's what I always throw it back to is that, and now what I sometimes say to clients is, I can work at any fees, but let's go through the lists of the stuff I do and let's cut stuff out. And so a good example would be like meeting people in person. Well, I can't do that with a lower fee. Oh no, we want that. And then that's the point. It's establishing through that you establish your worth, and through charging you establish your worth. And I think through that you get amazing clients, and then and people respect you for it as well. I think.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think what I'd just add to that is it's always really important to set your stall out right at the start. So get that rule that this is my work. I expect to be paid, and you've got to be really hard on that first sort of a thing with the client, so they know what you're about. Because after, if you report almost apologizing for your fees or for them invoices, they're just going to let that roll, and it's always hard to claw back. And I've gone. I'm mentoring some young architects who are in business themselves, and that is one of the main topics that come up, actually getting paid, or clients maybe spending too much time spending too much time with the architects, but obviously it waters down their fee. So you've got to say, look, if you want more time, it's going to cost this much. So it's always about getting them ground rules set right at the beginning.
I completely agree. And that's why I quite enjoy it. We're talking about sticky subjects because getting paid and all this stuff, it's a very tricky one. And I think with time, what you're talking about is it comes with a bit of time, a bit of confidence, a bit of belief. And you know, if you've done a good job on something and it's been established at the start, you're quite in your right to ask for that free. You're quite in your right to ask for getting paid. The other point that I think that you're really good at as well. And I kind of, when we've joked a little bit as well, because on LinkedIn, you've got 28,000 connections and I know the limit's 30,000. So I was teasing you about who's going to be let in, and I'm on 20,000 as well. But the number aside, I think what the other bit in terms of architecture, which is really important as well, is getting out there and getting involved. And so again, we're talking about Colleen, and Colleen, if you're listening, love what you do. The point is she needs to get out there and network. Like the way I get out there and network and the way you're on LinkedIn, I think it's so important to be connected. And that's what the McDonald Company slogan is, which at first I was like, be connected? What do you mean? But now I really believe that of actually, the more you speak to people, you were kind enough to speak to me before, and then we organically come to you. I think in architecture, you have to get involved and you have to get out there. And in my experience, you have to make a bit of that effort. It doesn't always come to you. No. So, I mean, what's your kind of thoughts on networking and getting involved, and any advice along that line for anyone listening?
Well, networking is massively powerful. I mean, it really is. You know, I've managed to go to Rome and speak and lecture and get paid. Get paid, not just you know, flights and accommodation. So that came through LinkedIn. You know, people see me post on LinkedIn about certain subjects, and then and that connection is still there with that university. Colleen, you know, back to Colleen, I think she hardly had any followers. She was barely posting. She didn't see any benefit in LinkedIn when we started this mentoring process, you know, 12 months ago. And now she's on there, you know, daily. Getting more clients that way, and pushing out her portraits. She's across all platforms. She is, you know, she'll tell you she's quite a shy person. You know, and I think there's a lot of people who are shy, but still have got a massive social media presence. So, you know, you can hide behind the social media. I don't think it's something I do. I don't know whether it's you do that. You definitely don't strike me as that person.
No, we're definitely around on LinkedIn. You're definitely in my feed, and I think I'm in a lot of people's feed as well. And what I would say about that, and again, I'm sure you agree, and we will talk about this because I think the polls, and you know what I mean with the polls, definitely brings it up. I think one of the reasons people get intimidated with being online is that it reminds me a bit like, because I used to be a bit of a gamer geek, and I used to play, I think it was World of Warcraft or Star Wars, and there used to be a forum online. And I remember once I posted something on there, and I absolutely got destroyed in the Star Wars game. You can't say that, you can. And I remember years ago thinking like, I'm never posting on that forum again. And I think what can happen on these forums or online or LinkedIn, sometimes you're going to say something and not everyone is going to agree. No. Or you get that guy or lady that says something. But my kind of rule is, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, is that sometimes in life you get perfectionists, sometimes, and I get that. But with me, if you look back on the Architecture Social podcast, the first ones aren't polished, right? I don't like the thumbnails. But if I go back, Jason, and you know this, you got a family, you got kids, everything. Yeah. That you're just going to be wasting time. And so it's about evolving or growing. And not everything I post online lands well, or sometimes things go big hits, some things don't. But you kind of have to, as long as you're not offending anyone. Yeah. But we'll make a distinction there. You can kind of, sometimes it's okay saying a controversial point as long as I think that you're not being rude to someone. Yeah. But do you agree as well about being online and being out there and kind of be in front of the front?
Yeah, it is always a risk, I think, when people start posting. They're worried about what other people think. But you're asking for people's opinions, and you want debate. And I don't preach to be the best architect in the world. I don't know everything, but I've got a voice, and my opinion it means something. And the polls are so interesting. I think we should talk about that, because sometimes you really don't know what is going to work. You'll spend lots of time, on an evening, sort of, writing a great post, seeing something you think's fantastic. You'll post it, and I've got 28,000 people. No one interested. No one commented. Nothing. And then you'll put up, like I saw. I think we talked about this. Someone had they were gone back to work. They'd put a jacket potato on their laptop. Okay. And they had put a filling in the jacket potato, and they'd posted this picture, and they said, "What's your favorite jacket potato topping?" That went viral across LinkedIn. Everyone was commenting. I think there were like 3,000 or 4,000 comments. I would never have thought that would work.
Do you know what, though? I got to laugh, because when you talk about that, it makes me giggle in my head, because I've never gone as viral as that jacket potato. but at the same time, right, I do like it to feed a little bit back into what I do, because, sometimes I do believe that these memes that float around on LinkedIn, there's a few people looking at them, and I think that can be the person at work who's quote unquote like working, but no, you're not really. You're on the LinkedIn feed. So the polls that you've done, I think, are a little bit more substantial than the jacket potato, because we have relevant industry debate, and that's the point. And so the poll, and you tell me or not. So what happened lately is you posted, and you can tell me the particular numbers, but you just said, what do you think an architect's salary should be? That was one or two of them. But what was the main one that kicked off the big debate, the big thing that RIBA reposted and everything?
Yeah. So this is where I posted about the salary that architects get compared to other professions like a doctor or a lawyer.
Right.
So I did, I thought, quite a nice preamble, because with the polls, it's very constricted in the character allowance and how many options you can have. Okay. So I did a nice preamble saying, architects take 7 years, doctors take 6, but the financial reward is much more reduced than what a doctor and lawyer get when they qualify. It's a fact. I mean, you can, it just is. And I got, I just put that on as my first poll, and it went huge. Now, it didn't necessarily go huge in the conversion rate of 28,000 followers into 28,000 people voting. No, it was around about the 160 mark of people voting. But the comments, I got near enough as many comments as people voting. I think 107 comments I got before the poll closed. It's fascinating reading, because they're giving me all the reasons why they believe that architects are not valued and not paid well, which is great. It's great. It's great information. I had a few interesting debates, which you might have seen.
Yeah, I thought it was brilliant, because what was genius about it, and you've heard my opinion on this as well, is that basically you offered a fact and you didn't assert your opinion. You just put a few posts and a few replies that LinkedIn would allow. And what that did, and this is my opinion of it, is that I think that for some people, it can be a little bit of a tough question, because if you're talking about salary and worth, it can feel personal. And I completely understand that if, for instance, you worked somewhere for a long time, you work really hard and the salary hasn't increased for numerous reasons. Now, what's important to say is that you were not saying, is your worth there or that? But what was interesting, and my joke is that I think some of the pitchforks came out because it was a very divisive subject. It's like, Jason, what are you implying? And that. And I think you did a really good job of just saying, I'm asking your opinion. You can do your own poll. Don't worry. I'm just asking. It was an opinion piece, but it does raise some people's backs on this subject, because maybe it can get a bit personal for people. But the point was, you're not trying. You were interested in people's answers.
Yeah, I'm interested in people's opinion on it, because I think it's a subject that it's the one question that I get asked and people discuss in architecture. It's the number one question, and people don't like to probably say that online. But we're all we study for a long time. Why aren't we getting paid enough? And yes, there's Norman Foster out there, on the salary of £2 million a year. So obviously, architecture can pay. There's other practices, that have gone bust, and the liquidators have actually said to them, the business is not financially viable. So I'm interested in people's comments and people's opinions, and LinkedIn's, I think, is a really good way of getting that opinion. It's a professional network, and but yeah, some of the comments I've really enjoyed sort of reading. I don't know whether you have.
Yeah, I have. And it can be a bit of a giggle sometimes, but that's the thing. It's like we talked about before. You were happy to post that how people can all have their voice. Everyone was heard. And yeah, sometimes it's a bit of a tricky situation. But when you were saying that, and this is where it's really important, we talked a bit about fees before, and I'm not going to talk about fees for ages, but it was really interesting in terms of architecture. Again, it goes back to that thing. In my opinion, Jason, a lot of problems in architecture come from if the fees aren't established at the start. And I mentioned this with a colleague before. What normally happens is, and it's like everything in life, when you've got less budget to work on a project, then likely what happens is, say now you have less money in this hypothetical Jason Boyle Architects because your fees are low, then the current staff you have to work longer hours. You can't afford recruitment consultants because that's a luxury you can't afford. You've got to go direct. You can't afford marketing so much. You can't afford these things. And then what the biggest problem is, though, is that when staff then get unhappy, or then they leave, and then that's actually a much more massive cost to the business. And then I have to come in, and then my fees are involved, and then so it's kind of like this. I think architect's self-value and self-worth, and getting that fees right at the start and pushing for the best fees actually alleviates a lot of the problems, which is kind of what you were talking about earlier.
It does. And, if you've got low fees, it's just a rush to the bottom, and it just doesn't stack up financially. If it doesn't stack up financially, there's no point in doing it. I mean, there isn't. It's quite hard to say that, but if the money isn't there to do that job, then you just don't do the job, because the risk, what is the risk? I think studying architecture, becoming an architect is a risky business now,
Yeah, wow. Okay. That's an interesting statement. I mean, why do you think, and just give a bit of a flavor, we're talking organically now, but what do you mean in terms of, what do you mean in terms of risk?
Yeah, this is my opinion. Not my company's or anyone else or the RIBA. It's my opinion that you study for 7 years, you can come out with £70,000 worth of debt now.
Right.
Your salaries, as you can see, if you see my polls, a lot of the polls are still live. Please vote. And you can see the salary that when you newly qualify, on an average salary, it's not going to sustain you to pay back that debt or to get yourself on the housing ladder. It's not like a sudden leap into a really good job. Mostly you'll get into a practice. You'll have to work your way up for the next 10 years. You might set up on your own, which it may be a good thing, but then you've got all the problems of getting the fees in. So it is a risky business when you look at it. If you sort of looked at how much money you need for a mortgage to have kids, you add all of that in, and then you look at what salary you could earn over 10 years. I don't know if anyone's actually stacked that up. And the risk of losing the job, you've got the recessions. It is a risky business. I'm not saying it's not worth doing. I'm just saying be aware of it. Be aware of the risks when you go into it, and so you can make them adjustments.
I think that's really well said, because I agree with you. There's a reason I studied architecture, and even though I don't work directly in architecture right now, I love being involved into the architecture industry, and I love what the degree and diploma did, because stuff like this now, or talking to people, and there's nothing like doing crits in life. So for you to learn a thick skill, that's a really good life lesson. You know, being torn to pieces and then bringing yourself back up, and then doing it the next time, and, you know, fighting your ground is a life skill that I think is so essential. And, you know, architects, you do so much, but that's this. And I love your explanation there, because the point is, you're saying risky, but if you're aware of it, I think that it's absolutely fine for graduates right now. And look, there's something awesome about architecture where the point is, it's even like what you're doing in nuclear. The reason why, and it's like that analogy of when people are watching Coronation Street and everyone's putting their kettle on, you literally deal with the infrastructure so that the powers, everyone in the UK can have a cup of tea whenever they want, because you're literally powering, you know, the country. And what I think the brilliant thing with architecture is, never lose sight of the fact that, you know, you can work on hospitals which save lives. Look at, we're in the coronavirus right now.
You've got the doctors. The doctors have got to perform their operations in a hospital. Who has a hospital? The architects. You know? Schools,
we've got schools, or even, for instance, I would love working in. I remember I was in a rented when I had my own business. I had a WeWork office, and it was like a pleasure to be there. So architecture improves lives. Okay, what we're just saying though, and this is my opinion, but my opinion comes from working in architecture and working in recruitment, is sometimes what I say is that you have got to always fight for your salary. You have always got to push for it. I think you can, if you work hard and you deliver schemes, you always have a really good case, especially if you've got a good work ethic, to push for your salary. Yeah. And I would advise anyone to do that. But as you said as well, architecture, I do think, though, is definitely an aspect of it that you have to do it because you love it. Yeah. And if you are just solely interested in it for money, it is not the career for you. 100%.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and I think it's important that you make that distinction. You know, you should not go into this profession if it's solely about the money. And I'll tell you a very quick story. When I was in practice in Manchester, we had some work experience guy come in for a couple of weeks, and I asked him the question that I think everyone would ask is like, why do you want to become an architect? You know, why did you want to come into this office? And he turned around to me and he said, "Oh, because you earn a good salary." And I went, "Really?" He said, "What?" I said, where have you heard this from? And he said, "Oh, my parents. I said, "Oh, are your parents architects?" "Oh, no. But they've heard it's a very well-paying profession." And so I said to him, what do you think I earn then? You know, what do you think? And this is when I was first in practice. And he said, "Oh, 60,000. And I was like,
nowhere near.
So I was like, you know, I just really had to sort of sit down with him and sort of take him through and not destroy his dreams, but just make him aware. I think if we're all aware of the situation, if we're aware of the risks, we're aware of what we're going into, I think then everyone is, you don't shatter them dreams, you know?
Yeah. And that's where I want to go with this, because this is not about, and please, anyone listening, and I'm more than happy to talk about it as well. I'm not complaining, or I'm not, this is no one's problem per se. What I'm on about is that there's always an opportunity. But what we're talking about is when you establish fees, or like when Colleen's billing work, the point is there's skills there. If Colleen's artwork wasn't good and I like it, then no one would pay. And what we're on about is that when you're doing a good building, or when you're a good architect, think about the commercial return for it. Think about the fact that if you can charge a higher fee in your own architectural practice, and you can start pushing for quality and start pushing for what you believe quality demands, then you have a better quality of life as well. Yes. And things get easier, and you can pay staff a bit more, and staff then appreciate that and the benefits and work culture, and it all kind of trickles into this magic formula that everything slowly goes up. And that's what we're talking about. It's more about raising the bar because we're worth it. Not and what the tone is here. It's not like, oh, well, we're not paid and just give up and we're going to whinge. It's about highlighting problems and talking about it. And that's what I like about the poll, because it isn't doing it to stir up. It's to have a conversation. And I kind of feel that it's like anything. It's like equality, diversity, salary, it's all these difficult subjects. We're not saying it's easy to manage, and we're quite realistic, the current constraints. But if you have to start pushing for it somewhere for it to change, right?
I think so. And I think if you see the results of some of the polls, like one that's just closed, the architects were saying the biggest reason it's 60% or 61% said that it was because people don't know what architects do. So if they don't know what they do, how can you demonstrate value? How can you? And it's how do we make architects or the general public and clients aware of all of the things that architects do? Yes, we design, but we used to be called master builders back, many, many hundreds of years ago. That's where the name architect comes from, the master builder. We build things. We don't just design something that stays on the computer. It's something, we create environments, and, it's a skilled profession.
Yeah, I would say is that there's a really good example that one of my directors said. So on the flip side is that one of the directors of architecture I worked under, a fantastic guy. And so he had a friend that was paid, $100,000. And at the time he was an associate. So salary is likely in London to be half that, right? Maybe a bit more. And I remember he said, on one hand, his friend earns loads of money, but his friend who was a lawyer was like, I'm so jealous of you. And he was like, why? And he's like, you get to design buildings all day. I'm knee deep in Excel all the time, and you actually making a difference. And I think there's a truth to that, as in there's something about architecture. We say all this, but the glimmer of hope is that where I enjoyed working in industry is that I'm really proud that I worked on one or two buildings, and you literally, whenever I pass them, whoever I'm with, I will literally maybe bore them to death for 5 minutes talking about what I was doing on it. But I'm incredibly proud of doing that. And there is something about, you can actually in real life point to something and say, I built that, which I do think there is not a price tag you can put on that. And I'm just saying that in terms of recruitment, I do enjoy helping people in their career, and they go and do stuff. And I get a bit of that thing, and you can get that buzz in mentoring as well. When you've helped someone and they do it for themselves, you're incredibly proud. But one of the trade-offs in terms of my role now is that, and that's why I did the Architecture Social, because when you're an architect on the front line, you are making a difference. Yeah. And it's not all about money. So I think that's one of the trade-offs. I just think the interesting thing that we talk about is obviously if you can push up on the salary, then you can improve quality of life and you can kind of enjoy these things. But you're always going to have that difficult balance.
Yes, you are. And I think you're right, touching back onto the mentoring side of things, the greatest joy is actually seeing someone you've started with and then seeing them kind of turn into this fantastic, successful person, and that's almost like creating a piece of architecture. You're actually, you're designing something and you're seeing it built, and then you get the feedback from the clients who are actually using the building. It's just like that with, watching someone grow. And it's a similar thing, I think, buildings and people, it's the same kind of process.
Yeah, and I suppose what I found really interesting from the podcast you did about mentoring, and there's a certain quality that I've seen as well, that in terms of mentoring, you can't mentor everyone per se. But what's interesting is that there's certain qualities that people to go out there and do something, because in life, I always find that you have people that talk about an idea, and then there's people that do the idea. And I always find that ideas ironically, I think they're only as good as your ability to execute them. And I'm not saying you need to do it perfectly, but to have an idea and then go, I'm going to go out there. And whether you succeed or not, I think the whole half of it is failing. Right? The amount of failures I've done, quote unquote, like the architectural recruitment business I set up at the time, I left Bespoke Careers, big company, and I big naively went, we're going to do it. And it was such a culture shock, but there's nothing like being there and doing it to learn. And I do think that there's a certain mindset that really works, that not everyone can do that, but I do think in someone's ability to learn, they have to be open-minded. So they have to be open to you suggesting, maybe asking questions which can feel a little bit probing at times to make them think and all this stuff. But it requires a certain personality, doesn't it, to be A, mentored, and then B, to go out and do things. But I mean, what's your kind of thoughts on the front line on that subject?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's an American thing that they very much buy into the fact that you go out there, you try something, and if you fail, it's just learning experience. Where I think over here we love to bash people who fail and push them down, and it's I think it is changing. I think that's why mentoring has definitely risen in the last probably 5 years. People understand the benefits of actually having someone guide them and get them there faster. There's got to be a benefit of having a mentor. Otherwise, why use one? It's imparting that experience onto someone and giving them all the little cheats, the little habits, the little stacking of habits that works well that you've learned. And yeah, it's I think that's critically where it lies. We should go out there and turn that idea into taking action. And I think I'm always interested in working with people like that and holding them to account. So it doesn't work if people are just talking about doing something and I don't see them actually carrying that out. I can't work with them. You've got to put your money where your mouth is and just go and do it.
Yeah, and then I'm touching upon that as well, because I've learned a few things from the Architecture Social as well. So when I was first doing things, Jason, in my spare time, I would try to do as much one-on-ones as possible. And what I learned is that it was an inefficient use of my time, because what it is one-to-one is highly valuable for that person. But because I had a limited amount of time, then that person would go off and then someone would ask the same question. Yeah. And so it's a very different model to what you do. So where I try to, in terms of structuring what I do, and I'm going to go back to work full time next week, which means that I've even got less time during the day because I have to honor the time that I work employed in that. But what I've done in terms of the Architectural Social before, which is a little bit different from what you do, is that I try to get a subject that I felt was appropriate. So maybe talking about CVs for an hour on the podcast or portfolio and go into it. So it was more a general guide to try and get people infused and learn and kind of do certain things. And what I've learned as well is I'm happy working full time in my job, but to do the one-on-one, which you do as well, I do think it requires the commitment from both people. And where I'm going with this as well, because mentoring, you do charge a fee for that. There is, you are doing it, but I think that establishing a fee with someone means they're serious about change. And what I think is really important, where I'm going with this here, is that the point is when you take someone on board and you, in terms of mentorship, you establish perhaps it's like a fee per month or there's a commitment. The point is you then have to deliver on it, and you can then do the ones-on-ones, which I can't afford to do right now. And that's the difference, isn't it? It's very bespoke.
Absolutely. And I think what I find, again, from, you shout in here, you'll find people have a gym membership. So they will pay 50, 60 pounds a month for a gym membership and for their body, and to train and get fit. But they won't pay someone to work on their mindset and help them through their career. And the career is where they earn the money to pay for the gym. You know? And, if you can, if you can raise someone's generally, when I'm working with someone, their salary and their income will go up. So it kind of pays for itself. So I always have that problem when you speak to someone and this is how much it is. And then it's like, I can't afford it. And then you go, but you can afford to go to the gym. You can afford to go to the pub. Well, you can be able to go to the pub, So it's about targeting exactly what you want out of life. If you want to make that change, mentoring and a one-to-one, coming back to your point, is the perfect way to do it.
Yeah, and I agree with that because I think as well, I always it's like the mental health aspect. Like you can get really good benefits from seeing a therapist, and what you're talking about is that you're a career coach, and it's a bit like what I do, in a different way. And in recruitment, I can say I have a particular job. And you were applying for it for whatever reason, Jason, I've got the time to mentor you and go through it. But what people have to realize is that while a recruitment consultant can offer value in certain situations, they're effectively hired by the client. What I like about the mentoring model is that you're saying, my sole agenda is to help you. Yeah. Okay. You're paying for my time, but that means I can give you my time. I will listen. I will help. And then the bit that I always find interesting is that actually, if it's not working out, I could be like, Jason, I would 1 month in. It's not quite the right fit. Shake hands, move on. You're not trying to swindle it. You're just saying, great, let's go for it.
And it often doesn't work with me. So I know instantly, probably within the first session, that I can't work with someone. And I think I'd like to reach this out to, firms. So firms all have this thing where they call it mentoring. And essentially it's just looking after the people. You'll get a superior in a firm who will be looking after your career in that firm, but they're just looking after you in order to, obviously grow within the profession and learn information. But it's about obviously their business. So if you're the individual being mentored by someone, the best mentoring you can get is outside of that organization. And that's where I can come in and help because I'm completely independent and I'm looking after that individual.
And I think, well, actually, they do complement each other because I do think that it's good an employer has mentoring, but the distinction that I think you make a good point on is that is for everything to work within that architectural practice way. And what you're talking about is a career consultant potentially for life, as in your allegiance is not to a company, your allegiance is for the best interest in the person. So I think that's where it can be a really interesting model. And I think that I would be interested in taking all of that. It's like, look, if RIBA's got a course online, then great. And it's like with the stuff that I put out, it's more because this is my general opinion on a CV or a portfolio. And what I talked about is how I would generally, and again, it's my opinion piece, but I think it works. Mine is more like the online, Steve Drew, Architecture Social, my thoughts on this is kind of my version of how to go about it. And they are principles I believe in. But I'll tell you a really good example on that is that I'll have, I've had a lot of really good positive comments about it. And I really appreciate if anyone listens to it. And then I'll turn around and I'll go, great. So you listened to the episode where I said, send out your CV to lots of places and to challenge yourself. I went, that was brilliant. And I go, all right, cool. How many CVs did you send out today? 4. And I'm like, I said more than that. I said, let's be volume. And that's what I think is special about the mentoring is that there's an element of accountability. And
absolutely.
And it's not judgment. You're not looking down on someone and going, it's not that. It's more about, come on, I know you can do more. Can we push to 6? Can we push to 8? You've done 12 today. That's an increase on 4 yesterday. That's awesome. That's sweet. And I think that's where I see that what you do is successful.
Absolutely. And what people probably don't really understand is very successful people generally. It's obviously about working smarter, not harder. I always preach this. It's just those little adjustments and those little habits, and then repeating them daily. So it becomes like a mantra. So it becomes like washing your face in the morning. You do these things instinctively. And when you get to that point, then you'll see your life transform. And that's what it's definitely, it started in America, but it's been written about so many times, from the 70s, and it's still relevant today. But just people are not aware of it. And, having someone to hold you to account on a monthly basis, for example, so it's not too expensive, I think is fantastic. And it is, I've proven it works. It just does.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. And that's the point. You can try it out and as well talk about it before. So I think, this to me has felt like a really good overview. And what I would say is, in case you're not already one of the 28,000 connected to Jason already, where can we find you? Any Architecture Social listeners, you're on the Architecture Social, which is awesome. You're also on LinkedIn. How can people get a hold of you and say hello?
Yeah, definitely LinkedIn, but get in. I've only got 2,000 people left before. I can also put my email on here. I don't particularly care, but yeah, you can get me on an email. It's jason.architect101@gmail.com.
Okay.
Watch out for the spam. So you can connect with that way, but definitely LinkedIn, because I think you'll see I do push out a lot of, I think, is quite interesting content out there, and I'm open to hearing if you want mentoring, and if you want to know more about that, I'd be absolutely fantastic, to have a chat.
Brilliant. Look, it's been an absolute pleasure. I've really enjoyed this chat. Maybe what we can do is talk down the line. We'll get a few more polls in. We'll see where we're at. Maybe there's a few. And perhaps we can go into a little bit more about what you do in terms of nuclear architecture as well. I've really enjoyed this. And while I will put the link and to your LinkedIn, and we can take it from there. Thank you so much, Jason. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
All right. Cheers.
Amen.